In recent weeks, political tensions between Canada and the United States have noticeably decreased, following the 30-day suspension of tariffs. This has allowed Canadian political parties to redirect their focus toward lobbying efforts and strengthening global relationships, particularly expanding trade with the European Union and Eastern partners. This shift towards calmer political conditions has been covered in our latest videos. However, a different aspect of the trade dispute is unfolding at the grassroots level among Canadian citizens, an issue that has received less attention in global media. Recent reports show a growing movement against any notion of annexation, with campaigns urging Canadians to reconsider traveling to the United States and even boycotting American products. These consumer-driven responses could have significant economic consequences for the U.S., regardless of whether the tariff disputes are resolved in the near future. The situation becomes even more concerning if this sentiment escalates, leading to widespread boycotts of additional U.S. goods such as cars, electronics, and other consumer items. The economic fallout could extend well beyond the immediate impact of the tariff suspension. Before diving into these emerging trends, let's take a closer look at how this issue began and how it has evolved over time. Since the beginning of his second term, President Trump has repeatedly targeted Canada with a combination of tariff threats and provocative statements that go beyond trade issues. His comments on social media platforms like Truth Social and at public events have reignited long-standing debates about U.S.-Canada relations. Critics argue that Trump's rhetoric is designed to economically pressure Canada, even suggesting that if Canada cannot stand on its own, it might as well be absorbed into the U.S. as the 51st state. Trump has often raised the idea that Canada would be better off joining the U.S. For example, in a widely discussed social post, he mentioned calling our great American hockey team to cheer them on against Canada, stating that Canada, with far lower taxes and much stronger security, may soon become America's 51st state. He has also mocked Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, calling him Governor Trudeau, a title implying that Trudeau acts more like a state governor than the leader of an independent nation. In one instance following a tense meeting at Mar-a-Lago, Trump remarked that if Canada couldn't survive without U.S. support, perhaps it should simply become a U.S. state. These threats have gone beyond rhetorical insults. Trump has warned that unless Canada changes its policies, his administration would impose steep tariffs on Canadian goods. In one early press conference, he justified these threats by citing concerns over illegal immigration and the flow of fentanyl into the U.S. One of his main arguments was that if Canada does not take responsibility for the role it plays in these issues, the U.S. might have no choice but to use economic pressure, even suggesting that Canada might as well join the U.S. These remarks were part of a broader strategy to economically pressure Canada, using tariffs as a tool to potentially push Canada towards becoming the 51st state. Recent reports indicate that not only have Canadian politicians reacted strongly to these provocative statements, but many Canadians across the country have mobilized against any thought of merging with the U.S. Polls have shown that a large majority of Canadians reject the idea of becoming the 51st U.S. state. For example, a YouGov poll found that around 82% of Canadians oppose such a merger, underscoring the deeply held belief in Canada's independence. This opposition is especially strong among certain groups, such as women and older Canadians, reflecting both historical ties and contemporary values that favor national sovereignty. In addition to political resistance, Canadians are also responding economically. Reports from Reuters and the AP highlight that Trump's tariffs have directly impacted everyday life in Canada. Many Canadians have canceled trips to the U.S. and are boycotting American-made goods. For example, there has been a noticeable decline in vacation bookings to U.S. destinations and a boycott of U.S.-made liquor, especially in Ontario, where provincial authorities have removed American brands from shelves. Patriotic consumer movements have gained traction, with viral hashtags like #BoycottUSA and slogans such as "Canada is not for sale," urging Canadians to support domestic products. Retailers have reported a noticeable increase in sales of Canadian-made goods as part of a collective effort to protect the economy from foreign tariffs and retaliatory measures. On the political front, leaders in Canada have firmly rejected Trump's ideas. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau has repeatedly emphasized that Canada's natural resources, democratic institutions, and cultural identity are non-negotiable. In his televised addresses, Trudeau has also warned of the potential economic risks that American tariffs pose, not just for Canadians, but for American workers as well. Higher tariffs on Canadian exports could lead to shutdowns of American manufacturing plants. Former officials, including figures like Chrystia Freeland, have condemned Trump's tariff threats as acts of economic warfare. Freeland has warned that these policies could harm American jobs and raise prices for U.S. consumers, She has described the tariffs as self-destructive and argued that they represent a direct attack on Canada's sovereignty, which is a cornerstone of the country's identity. Despite the ongoing tensions, efforts are being made to remind both nations of their long history of cooperation. Trudeau has invoked historical moments, such as the times when Canada and the U.S. fought side by side during global conflicts, to emphasize the deep ties that bind the two countries together. While Canada and the United States share a deeply interdependent relationship, Canada has steadfastly maintained its independence. Leaders in Canada have emphasized to the U.S. that free trade and robust border security can coexist without compromising Canada's sovereignty. Trump's comments have sparked a symbolic response across the country, especially during the 60th anniversary of the Canadian flag. Citizens have proudly displayed the maple leaf on homes, cars, and at public events. This surge of patriotic expression, covered by outlets like the AP, serves as a powerful counter to Trump's rhetoric. These displays symbolize not only a rejection of the idea of annexation, but also a strong affirmation of Canada's unique identity. The Canada is Not for Sale movement has gone viral, with businesses launching merchandise like caps and t-shirts to reflect this sentiment. These products have become symbols of national pride, reinforcing the message that Canadians are united in opposing external pressures to yield their sovereignty. Another clear manifestation of this sentiment is seen in travel behavior. Historically, many Canadians flock to U.S. cities and resorts for vacations, but now many families are canceling these trips entirely. Instead, they are choosing alternative destinations, either within Canada or abroad, that don't require crossing the border. This shift in travel plans is more than just an inconvenience. It's having a significant economic impact. The U.S. Travel Association has estimated that a sustained drop in Canadian tourism could cost the U.S. up to $2.1 billion in visitor spending and result in the loss of approximately 14,000 jobs. This highlights how critical Canadian travelers are to American tourism-dependent regions. Popular destinations like Florida, which traditionally hosts between 1.3 and 1.5 million Canadian visitors annually, are now facing a notable revenue shortfall. This downturn is expected to affect various sectors, including local retail and hospitality services. Canadian airlines have also reported a decline in demand for U.S.-bound flights. WestJet, for instance, has experienced a 25% drop in bookings to the U.S. recently, prompting the airline to reconsider its flight schedules. Air Canada, while not yet adjusting its flights, has acknowledged the uncertain situation and is carefully monitoring trends. These changes are part of a larger ripple effect. As fewer Canadians cross the border, both local economies in the U.S. and Canada are feeling the impact. American businesses reliant on Canadian spending are seeing revenue drops, while Canadian service providers are increasingly focusing on local tourism. This shift in travel extends beyond leisure trips. Educational travel, including school excursions to cultural and historical U.S. sites, has also been affected. In Quebec, school authorities have advised families to reconsider travel plans, with Education Minister Bernard Drainville urging students to rethink trips to New York City. This advice has been echoed by several school districts in Quebec and Manitoba. One Quebec high school even canceled trips to New York and Boston, emphasizing that the decision was about both safeguarding student safety and sending a clear message of resistance against policies viewed as economically damaging. For many Canadians, the decision to redirect their travel to domestic destinations like Toronto instead of New York City is both a practical and symbolic gesture. It's a way of reducing dependency on a neighboring country whose actions are seen as an attack on Canadian sovereignty. This shift is also backed by a surge in patriotic pride, with surveys showing a growing preference among Canadians for supporting local products and domestic tourism over engaging with U.S. markets. Now, let's take a look at the trade relationship between Canada and the U.S., which has long been one of the most important and mutually beneficial in the world. The U.S. and Canada share the longest international land border and have an interconnected economy that heavily relies on trade. In 2024, the total exchange of goods and services between the two countries was valued at about $1.2 trillion. U.S. exports to Canada totaled $349.58 billion, with a trade deficit of $63.3 billion for the U.S., largely due to energy imports from Canada. Canada not only serves as the U.S.'s largest export destination, but also absorbs around 75% of Canada's exports, illustrating the deep economic ties between the two. This relationship is strengthened by the United States-Mexico-Canada Agreement, USMCA, which replaced NAFTA in 2020. The new agreement has improved trade procedures, enhanced protections for key industries like automotive manufacturing and dairy, and bolstered energy trade. Over 2 million jobs in the U.S. are directly tied to trade with Canada, making this partnership essential for the stability of the U.S. economy. The trade relationship spans various sectors, including energy, automotive, agriculture, metals, machinery, and technology. Canada is the U.S.'s main source of crude oil, natural gas, and electricity, with Canadian energy exports valued at around $180 billion in 2024, nearly 44% of total U.S. energy imports. Over half of all crude oil imported by the U.S. comes from Canada, and U.S. refineries, especially in the Midwest, are designed to process Canadian heavy crude. Canada also ranks as the top supplier of electricity to states like New York, Michigan, and Minnesota. Any significant disruption in this energy trade could result in energy shortages and price hikes, potentially increasing gasoline costs by up to 30%, triggering economic instability in the region. In the automotive sector, Canada and the U.S. essentially function as a single manufacturing unit. More than 75% of vehicles produced in Canada are exported to the U.S., while 60% of U.S.-made auto parts are sent to Canada for final assembly. The Detroit-Windsor corridor, one of the busiest in the world, facilitates the movement of over 2.3 million vehicles annually. Disruptions such as tariffs or border restrictions could significantly increase production costs and vehicle prices. Canada is also a key supplier of raw materials essential to U.S. manufacturing, including aluminum, steel, rare earth elements, copper, and nickel. In 2024, metals and minerals made up 11% of U.S. goods imports from Canada, worth over $42 billion. These materials are crucial for industries such as defense, electronics, construction, and renewable energy. Any trade barriers or tariffs on these resources could result in shortages and higher production costs in industries like aerospace, construction, and consumer electronics. Agriculture is another important part of the bilateral trade relationship. In 2024, U.S. agricultural exports to Canada reached $27 billion, making Canada the largest market for American farmers. U.S. exports to Canada include fresh produce, grains, beef, and processed foods, while Canada exports $32 billion in agricultural goods to the U.S., including dairy, wheat, seafood, and livestock. This trade helps maintain food security and stabilize prices, meaning any disruption could affect grocery prices and food availability for U.S. consumers. In conclusion, the economic ties between Canada and the U.S. are essential, not just beneficial. While the U.S. has a larger economy, its supply chains, energy security, and industrial base are heavily dependent on Canada. Billions of dollars in essential goods flow between the countries daily, and over 2 million American jobs are linked to this trade. Any major disruption could have widespread consequences for industries, workers, and consumers. That's all for today's video. We appreciate you watching. If you enjoyed it, please consider liking and subscribing to stay connected. Your support is invaluable to us. You can also watch another video from our channel now on the screen.